Hello, hello. It's May 16, 2023, SIG Node's weekly meeting. Welcome, everybody. Today agenda is quite packed, so let's get right into that. First is supplemental groups. I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared. What's your name? Shinga?
I think, Sergey, they said they can't make it because of the time zone. Yeah. So I haven't seen this one since we last missed it. I'll try to make a pass. Sergey, I know you were also reviewing, so maybe both of us can take an action to see.
I remember I finally approval, but I do remember we have some open question. There we did settle down, but we just want to, because we do agree that's the alpha, and we also agree about use cases. So that's why at the end I approve. But I do know there's the open question there. I even comment when I approve. I said, okay, there's the open question. Signal not converging yet. But on the other hand, I really want to help him to go through this because he's new, and the use cases also it is real. The one thing it is because what he proposed is not just change Kubernetes and not change Kubernetes and any daemon site or controller we managed. They also change like the CRI, like containerd and the qual, and even there's some of the alternative people are thinking about is OCI change. So that's why I want to help him because in the past we have so many people working on cross Kubernetes, right? So even I was in the past part of the containerd community, but I haven't done that for a while. So for the new people, how we are going to help them to bridge those gaps. So that's why I kind of think about let's discuss that part. Otherwise, I don't think all this can move forward. One thing it is also like if containerd don't have those change, what this feature, so how we are going to help. And another thing, this one is not included in the 1.28 planning. Maybe we should include that one and identify reviewer and from the very like the CRI representative and the Kubernetes representative. And then there's the of course approver, that's easy. I can still be the approver, but I want to see like how we're going to fill the gap or help him here.
Yeah, so for everybody's context, this is about CAP. Somebody discovered this problem with supplemental groups being inconsistently applied. So you may get not what you expected from pod spec and Docker definition. So CAP is trying to unify the way how we apply these supplemental groups and be able to enforce them. So yeah, and changing the default, like how containerd and CRI works, may break some scenarios. We don't know anybody who will be broken, but we believe that changing default, which is that expensive, dangerous, may not be ideal. So yeah, so it's mostly about changing default carefully and allowing customers to migrate easily. Next one, Todd.
Yeah. So cgroups v2 has a new feature called the cgroup aware out of memory killer, and basically when that is enabled on a cgroup basis, it causes all processes in the cgroup to be killed simultaneously if you experience an out of memory issue or out of memory kill instead of an individual process. The consensus seems to be that behavior is better for just about all users, so much so that it will probably make for a pretty good default. And then the real sticking point is there may be some users that rely on the old behavior. Like some discussions been brought up about like HA proxy or Postgres that actually might handle the current behavior well, where they can support individual processes being killed in the container. But sort of the assumption is that the vast majority of users don't run applications that can handle that well. So sort of discussion like, can we make it the default and just go with it? Or is that breaking change, and we need a KEP to actually cover the changing of that behavior. So that's what we'll discuss this week.
So I think, Todd, like as far as I know, there is like with the current implementation, there is no guarantee that the Postgres scenario will work, right? Like kernel is gonna pick a process at random. There's no definitive way where we can say, okay, don't kill my PID1 in the container.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way of. Yeah, it may just be working by accident.
Yeah, exactly. If it picks some other process, then it can recreate the worker process that got killed or something. So right now it's kernel picks random. I think that's a policy if we were to come up with some way in the API. And I think another thing to consider here is, like I was talking with David Porter on the next steps on V2 PSI. So eventually we'll have a user space killer like oomd, and then we'll hopefully have more control over picking which process within the container gets killed. So one way here is to go with Clayton's suggestion and like introduce different an enum, maybe kill all the processes, kernel picks a process which is random today, that could be the name of what happens, and then in the future we can add other fields like, okay, user space policy based kill, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And so that would start with since we're talking about API change, I would really start with a KEP to sort of document that behavior.
I think that may make sense, at least thinking about what's coming next.
All right.
Yeah, I didn't find any comment suggestion how exactly Postgre handling this situation. Do you have any links? Because I just don't feel like we never promised to have only one process killed, right? So I wonder if we need to keep this promise and not kill everything.
Yeah, I don't think there's any like explicit guarantees that it works the way it does. It's just been sort of it's been that way for a long time. And sort of my thought when seeing this was that it's probably better for more users to have the entire container killed and restarted as opposed to having some portion of processes or single process killed and then get into a sticky debugging situation trying to figure out like, well, my container's still running because there happens to be bash that's still running, but all the actual workload is dead now. So that was a thought to just try to make it a little more reliable.
Bruno, do you have any specific reasons to allow this?
I just read Clayton's comment, and that what led me to think about, okay, what's coming next on the user space side. So if you're going to add different kinds of behavior, maybe it makes sense to just retain the existing and expand. Though initially I was leaning towards just changing it. One more case, there are two more things here I want to add. So there is a kernel knob that says kill the allocating one. So in that case, what happens is a process that triggers the killer gets killed, even though it may not be the one that is using the most memory. So I'm not sure if we have any specific use cases for that.
Manu, but the Kubernetes original default behavior is to kill the entire of the C group during these cases, right? We may fail to do some run into some issue. So I think what the suggest the current it is kind of the improve current default behavior better. I know there's the other user space all those kind of discussing for last many years. Honestly, I even think, if I remember correctly, that's even what I suggest a long time back. But that's enhancement to me. I think that's kind of the enhanced based on the current behavior. This is my personal opinion because I'm okay with point, but I just want to say current proposal sounds to me it is just optimization for current behavior, make that correct. Because our default in the past, we always say, oh, we kill entire of the container.
I think that's fair, Don. Like I can be convinced to just go and change the behavior. It's just like Clayton's comment made me rethink that a bit. I'm like, I'm fine if we as Node think it makes sense to just go with this behavior by default.
So we can start talk about user space, all those kind of things. I just feel like the current one is just optimization, and maybe it's overdue for introduce the API, introduce the config decided. Because those use cases is still need a little bit more time, understand, and we do have experience in the past, but we never really make that work. What I say, the previous experiences in Borg world, but we didn't really make that real work until user space, boom, manage handler. So that's kind of things where I feel like maybe we need more time on that one for the open source, because open source cases is way more complicated to satisfy all common customer use cases. That's why. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Those are all fair points. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks. I will reply on the cap. I think on the issue, reply to the latest comment there. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. I think we have some work going on in Runc as well to take advantage of this. So.
Yes.
So just to summarize what I think I've heard, probably change the default behavior just to behave better for most users is fine, but maybe not document it or not call it out as a promise that we're gonna always that we're gonna try to do this, and sort of leave open the option of in the future adding a policy for a user space out of memory killer or something like that.
Yes, just include that one, user space, those kind of things as the non-goal, and the open say, okay, that's the next level of the enhancement we want to do. But for now, I think that should be okay.
Okay. All right. That's good.
Okay. Next one, Michal.
Yes, I have two subjects to discuss around pod failure policy. So the first one is an issue that I prepared pull request and cap update for 128. So this is due to when kubelet kills a pod to make room for a critical pod, then it's like kubelet preemption. So this can happen, for example, for stateful sets that need to allocate a pod. And in the pod failure policy cap, we introduced the disruption target. So this can be argued it's a disruption, and this was like omission of this scenario when looking for different scenarios. So I would call it a bug. But yeah, I prepared the cap update. I think the code is to do this is pretty simple. And it's up to discuss whether we want to like even cherry pick this bug, but it's an open question, so I will. It's not a very high priority. But in general, I want to ask for a SIG Node reviewer and approver for both the cap update and the PR. So that's the first thing. I don't know. Any questions to this one? Comments? Not hearing any, so I don't know. So the second thing I want to also bring to attention of SIG Node is again on related to pod failure policy. So this is about handling active deadline exceeded timeout. So here the situation is that when the pod exceeds the timeout, it is SIG termed. But it can handle it and exit with 0 exit code. And pod failure policy doesn't allow to match failed pods it allows to match by exit codes, but it doesn't allow to match by exit code of 0. So if this happens, and this is like an edge case, we cannot match and then assign like custom handling of such pods. So there is an issue raised. And this was discussed also by Jordan and suggested that the proper way is not to, because we originally thought about modifying pod failure policy to allow it to match by exit code 0. But as a result of the discussion, the conclusion is that it's better to actually introduce a dedicated condition. But then the question is, so this condition will need to be added by SIG Node, by kubelet. And then the question is, should it be part of pod failure policy cap? So in general, the view is that if it's like simple, then we could probably wrap it under the cap. But if it requires some refactoring or not obvious changes, then we will defer it for later, for future caps. And I already got like a discussion from SIG apps approvers that this wouldn't block like the pod failure policy graduation or anything. But the question remains whether we try to, like, if this is a simple change, and then we can consider wrapping this under. So again, I prepared a POC. But in this POC, what I do is I add the condition whenever we set the so whenever the pod exceeds the timeout, we set that the phase has failed, and we set the reason and message. And aside from this, based on the reason, I add the condition. So that's like a simple implementation. But it was, I think, contested by Jordan again, that in fact we shouldn't, we should set the phase as failed and add the condition in one of his comments only if the containers are actually killed. So this is the comment from April 13. And this is not what my implementation is doing. And I think to do this, some refactoring would be needed. So we would prefer that if we want to go this way, then we will leave it for future, this condition, and for like to own by people who need this condition more. So I don't know. It's an open discussion. What are your thoughts on that? I would like to discuss. Do you have some suggestions? Whether it's okay to just add the condition whenever we set the phase and as currently, like without changing the mechanics, or indeed it's an occasion where we want to, if we surface this as a condition, then we want to like review the API more and then maybe modify. And in that case, we will probably drop this improvement. Okay, so now I would be happy to hear some comments regarding both issues.
Introducing new field just to work around the refactoring sounds like, I mean, sounds scary.
Yes, that's why I want to avoid it. So I think the refactoring is out of question. The question is it like okay to surface? Like, I mean, it's out of question for the pod failure policy cap because it's scary to me as well. But the question remains whether it's okay to surface as currently the reason and message, but also promote it to the condition in a way, or yeah, or we want to delay that for a dedicated cap, adding this condition.
Yeah, I'm not quite clear what kind of refactoring will be needed. So it seems to be some kind of race issue between different systems trying to update the pod status. Do you for sure, like how confident you need to be knowing that it was killed by active deadline seconds, or it was exit by itself, but it was very close to active deadline seconds?
Yeah, that are all good questions, and I don't think we have a good answer for now. The way currently the code is structured, kubelet makes the decision that it sees that it exceeded the timeout, so it sets the phase, to failed. And based on the phase, it starts the termination procedure. But then it's possible, two scenarios are currently possible. First, that in the containers just terminate on their own before it actually attempts any killing, even sends the SIG term. And the second is that it sends the SIG term, but it's, repackaged as exit code 0. And in both cases, you can argue that they weren't killed, really. But we still would set the phase as failed. And I think this may be a long discussion during reviews. So I don't know. That's why I'm thinking of dropping this for now as a future improvement. But I also like.
Quick question I have: does the job controller use the deadline exceeded for its timeout, or does it have its own? Like, who usually uses this active deadline exceeded in the pod spec? Is it a widely used feature? Because I haven't seen it too widely used on pods themselves. But I'm trying to understand if maybe some controllers use it.
So first of all, job does have its own active deadline seconds timeout, and then it's job controller that marks the job and kills the job. And that's one mechanism. Coincidentally, I think they are called the same. And the second is kubelet level. And the one for kubelet, I think, is maybe more used. It is used by job users. Actually, I think this issue is raised by job users, but maybe more those who use restart policy on failure. Because this then it's more then the restarts are controlled by kubelet, not by the job controller. Although in this case it's weird, because in this case actually it is job. That's why we don't have a clear actually motivation now in job controller to do that, because it's not like a widely used feature, I think, and it's an edge case. So from our side, the investment, I think, yeah, I don't think it's like very much needed for job users, but there might be some, like, again, this issue was raised by job users, so I have to say.
I think the use case here is very similar to reaching the memory limit. So if a pod reaches the memory limit, that's considered a bug in the job implementation, the application. So similarly, if you set up a deadline for the pod and it reaches the deadline, it can be considered a bug in that code. So that's why it's important to detect it, as opposed to the pod being disrupted by, I don't know, by priorities or something else. So that's the use case here, distinguishing whether there is a bug in the application so that we can stop retrying. Whereas if it's a disruption, we want to keep retrying the pod because it was not the application's fault.
Pardon me, like how do you distinguish reaching the deadline seconds by mistake or by not completing all the work that was scheduled? I'm trying to understand, like, how do you differentiate on job side whether you need to retry or you don't have to retry?
Oh,
so
go ahead, Aldo.
Yeah, that's configurable by the user. I'm just mentioning the most common use case, which is if it reaches the active deadline, you want to fail.
The current behavior with failure is okay. We don't need any new indication.
Can you repeat, please?
So does it mean that current behavior when kublet sets failure, even if pod is just like few milliseconds late, is okay?
To my eyes, I guess it would be okay. But I guess we need to do the best possible detection, because this means wasted compute, right? So if the pod actually terminated, ideally we shouldn't be counting as active deadline.
I don't know if anybody has other comments or questions, please jump in. I think I haven't heard like definitely like this is what happening. This is a scenario that needs to be fixed. I feel that it's still not clear whether the fixing is needed. Am I understanding correct, Michal?
Yes. So yeah. So as you asked, if it's okay from the business perspective, if I reading your question correctly, that we set phase to failed, even though it, then I think from the user's perspective, it should be okay, and this fix wouldn't be needed. But but it was raised that it's better to only set failed if it was actually killed. So I was thinking that it may also be raised like during the implementation or cap review, etc. And committing that we do this may risk that we get stuck or get involved into refactorings that we don't have capacity to commit to. So yeah, that's why I'm like exploring how SIG Node sees the needed. So as I understand from the comments so far, you don't see yourself like the need to change the behavior, and what Kubernetes is doing itself, you don't need you don't see a need to change like that the phase is phase to fail is set whenever it exceeds the deadline, regardless of actual killing.
To be fair, like I only base in my questions and answers based on limited information I get from this description. So maybe if you have better description or like specific use cases, like this is where it's very bad, then it will be different conversation. But I mean, based on what you just presented, I don't feel it's a critical issue.
I feel the same way, and I have to admit I'm slow on this case. What you present here, I'm still reading, and so I'm not fully convinced the problem you state here it is critical. We need to address. I'm more concerned about the potential behavioral change and the potential misuse on this one. So we can, but not mean like this is not a really critical problem. It's just I have to admit from me perspective that I'm new to this problem, and so I haven't understand the problem yet. So that's why I cannot comment. I just want to say that. But that's just my 2 cents, not represent the signal. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess, yeah, I would like to ask you to maybe familiarize a little bit, go through, and again, 2 PRs like from me to cap updates around pod failure policy, then that are waiting for review and approval, hopefully. So
I'm okay to have the offline follow up with you too on this whole thing. To understand the problem better, then we can continue. So maybe today, at least Sergey and I both didn't convinced based on the current present here. Yeah, so that's why. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Aldo has a hand.
Yes. So speak a little bit about the current state. The current state is that there is already a reason and a message when there is active deadline, and that is buggy. I mean, it's not critical, but it's buggy. That's the current state. Now, the proposal here is that we also add a condition that matches this reason and message, such that it can be matched from the pod failure policy. And the contention here is that we are adding a condition knowing that the condition might not be true. So maybe it's okay not to change the status quo of the reason and message, but we are adding extra feature on top of it. In this case, the condition. And the concern from Jordan is that why are we adding something that we know is buggy? So I guess in that case, the stance from Jordan is we either don't add it or we add it, but we make sure it's not buggy. So kind of like the two extremes. And the other possibility is that we add it knowing that it's buggy, and we document in which scenarios it can be buggy. The example in the issue is that there is an active deadline of 10 seconds, sorry, 60 seconds, I think, with the container being sleep 60 seconds. So that's like the worst case scenario for this problem. So it's kind of a little bit artificial, but it proves that there is room for improvement. So yeah, that's basically the state of things. Those are the three options. I think Michał, the preference from the batch effort is that we either do nothing or we add a pod condition, but we don't want to take over the refactoring. And yes, so the question is which of those two options is more in line with what SIG Node thinks. I hope that clarifies the spectrum of.
And I just have one follow-up question on that. You mentioned it's buggy. It's buggy because the actual behavior in kubelet is buggy, or because like there's a natural erase with that sleep 60 and the termination being 60, the active deadline being 60. Is that like a fixable problem, or is that just naturally racy?
I'll leave that to Michał.
So to be honest, to me, it's not even clear if it's buggy. It's a matter of semantics that people can differ in opinion, I think, to be honest. Like Jordan presented the view that it shouldn't be failed. But if you ask me, I'm not sure. To me, it's a matter of semantics. What do we call failed? Does it mean that the containers are killed? What it means if there were 4 containers and 2 completed but 2 are killed? I think we are getting into area that is hard to interpret. So does it mean that at least 1 container was killed? And the current semantic to me actually isn't. I would consider it justifiable because of these issues with interpretability. Then maybe a simple interpretation that it's failed if it exceeded is okay. But it's disputable, and I'm not authority here, so and it was like contested by Jordan, who sees like suggests a different interpretation of. And then following with this interpretation, the current behavior is buggy, right? So. Aldo, is it?
Yeah, let's keep the discussion to Cap because we have few more topics today. Okay, Aldo, I see your thumb up. Michal, you okay with moving on?
Yes, I'm okay with just raising awareness for now.
Thank you for bringing it in. Yeah. So sidecar Cap. I wanted to highlight the sidecar work we're doing. We have a working group and we're meeting every week before this meeting. Recently, meetings weren't very long because we discovered less and less issues with the PRs that we sent. PR is in good shape. It implements skeleton functionality. It's ready to be reviewed, approved, or whatever. We tested it on Istio already. It's working. It's implementing new features like sidecar for init containers, restart of sidecars. So it's all working. It's great. Please spend time on reviewing it. We really want to get early in the release stage this time. So we have few follow-ups that needs to be made. We don't want to overcomplicate the big PR, but skeleton is ready. Like as I said, Istio already working with that, so it's supposed to be in a very good shape. So yeah. Next, any questions about sidecar?
So I started reviewing it, Sergey. I would also ask like more folks here to help with the review because it's big and it'll be good to get some eyes on the folks more familiar with the life cycle pod. Maybe David, if you have some time, it'll be useful to have your thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, David,
Sure,
help.
sure. I'll take a look as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I also will take a look. Yeah, but thanks, Monroe and David.
Yeah, from API perspective, Tim was API reviewer for that, but I think he's expecting SIG Node to get more approvals first, and then he will jump in with API. Or we can wait for Derek as well. Anyway, thank you everybody. Really appreciate it. Next one is Mo. Mo is here.
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me, I actually forgot what I wrote in the agenda, but let me just introduce the topic. So, so one of the sub-projects of SIG Auth is Secret CSI, which effectively exists to make it so that you can consume secrets from external vaults in Kubernetes without first putting them into Kubernetes secrets, right? So they basically show up as ephemeral volumes in your containers, and you just consume them as files. And then you should just link to the repo. So we have the capability of actually putting those external secrets into Kubernetes secrets as well, primarily for use cases such as like ingresses, which require a Kubernetes secrets reference. And we're not really trying to change any of that. The specific use case that we're trying to make better is a lot of times people will sync into Kubernetes secrets purely for the act of having them easily available as environment variables in their pods. And this is a case that we want to sort of discourage and move away from because it kind of nullifies a lot of the benefits of the CSI-based approach because, again, your secrets are in Kubernetes secrets instead of having the much more carefully orchestrated environment that your vault can provide. So I wanted to sort of raise this question to you guys, and I know there were some comments made on my little post there, but if I wanted to have some external entity provide like dynamic environment variables to containers, what would be the right way to do that?
So I posted a link to the cap that is currently in like proposed state. This cap is looking at consuming environment variables from some volume. So you can write a file and this file will be used as a source for environment variables. Is it kind of thing you're looking for?
So I guess theoretically that could work in the sense that if that cap was implemented as a way in a way that the like CSI API got to go first and thus could get all its volumes ready, and then it could be consumed that way. I think that would work. I think my overall question though is that the right way? to go about this, or is there some other layer or other mechanism that would make more sense? Because for me, if I'm going to make dynamic environment variables, I don't necessarily need the file on disk at all. Like I'm happy to make it work. That's not the issue. It's more of what would you expect the system to do? How would you build it if nothing existed right now? And the use case was just dynamic environment variables.
So are you familiar with the dynamic resource allocation work that we've been doing over the last year or so?
Only very, just the tiniest bit to know. Like,
Sure.
When I heard that, I heard like, I think of GPUs, not environment variables. So
Right.
maybe I have that.
Sure. So at the lowest layers of DRA, there's there's a standard that we use called CDI, which is the container device interface. And that is the thing that eventually makes this abstract notion of a device or resource available to a container. But one of the things that CDI allows you to do is inject environment variables into the container spec. So in theory, just in the same way you're creating one of these CSI drivers today for secrets, you could create a DRA driver whose job it was to call out to Vault, figure out what secrets you wanted to inject, generate a CDI file that had environment variables set to those values, and then that would become the device that you inject into the container. Device is kind of a misnomer. It's really just a set of edits to the container spec, one of which the edits can be is environment variables.
Interesting. And is what is like the security model for that information? Like, is it treated as confidential, at least at some level?
Yeah, I'm not sure. You meaning how do they actually get injected into environment variables to begin with? So this information would end up being, I guess, statically stored on a file at CCDI on your host file system, so that it would potentially be visible from within that file on the host.
I mean, that might be okay. Like, I'm not necessarily too stressed about like if you can do like host mounts if you can see the file. Maybe that's okay. Not 100% sure. I'm more like, I want to make sure that like there's no way to observe these contents from the Kubernetes API outside of like literally execing into the pod and running env.
Right. This would definitely give you that guarantee because so DRA is kind of a generalization of the persistent volumes API. So what you could get from persistent volumes, think of that for generic resources. But resources is defined loosely in that, it really is just a set of edits to a container spec where you, as the implementer of your DRA driver, have the freedom to do whatever you want at the node level before you actually make these edits to the container spec, which then get passed down the stack and injected as part of the container runtimes, creating the container step. So yeah, if you implemented the node side of this to actually be the piece that pulls from Vault, gets the secret, generates the CDI spec with those contents in it, that would all stay local to the disk. And then only once the container runtime came along to pick up those edits and push them into the container when the container started, nothing would ever go through the Kubernetes API.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you are worried about executing to container, probably the environment variable is at all not what you're looking for. Because you can always from like proc PID environments, you can get the values what was injected into container.
Yeah, no. So I'm not concerned about that. That is okay. I'm more concerned about like there's some other mechanism for example, like imagine that like any other container running on the same kubelet could somehow see into this. That's like a non-privileged container or a non-host accessing container, right? That would be the concern, is that there is an isolation between containers, which would be weird and unexpected. So I'm going to assume that's not how that works.
Yeah, that wouldn't be supported. That wouldn't be possible. No.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's a host breakout, then you can lose it. Otherwise, it should be okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're already like, if you can host breakout, then you could see the files that we were writing in our ephemeral things probably anyway. Like, I'm not that concerned. I mean, maybe it's a little easier because it's like an actual file on disk instead of like a memory mounted file or whatever. I'm forgetting the right name. Okay. The other question I had is, what exactly is the interface for DRA in the sense of like, can I have like a daemon set at runtime that adds capabilities, or does it have to be like statically given to the kubelet like on startup?
Yeah, so I gave a talk on this at the last KubeCon a few weeks ago. I can forward you the link. It's the title of the talk was how to build a driver for dynamic resource allocation. So it goes through all the pieces that are needed to build one of these drivers and how it interfaces to the system.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that'd be great.
Starting point. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I can definitely look at that. Okay. I think that's basically all I have. I can look at DRA, and then I can also look at that other cap and see if they make sense. Yeah, and I think DRA is alpha right now, right? So it's early.
It's still alpha, yeah.
I mean, in a sense, that's good for me because if I need something changed, now is the time to ask it.
Yep. Yeah, and I didn't understand your use case a bit more, but based on what you're describing, this to me would be, if you're already comfortable building a CSI driver to solve this problem, then moving forward, writing a DRA driver would probably be the more correct way if what you're looking for is environment variable injection.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Kevin, now it's your turn.
Oh, right. Yeah, so I just have a quick, I mostly just added this to see who the right person to be an approver for this would be. So we're planning on adding a field for CDI devices to the device plugin API in 128. So I've already added this to the planning doc. And it's really just a simple extension that, given that the CDI devices have now already been added to the CRI in 127. And now we just want to make sure that device plugins, traditional device plugins have the ability to pass CDI devices if they want to then get forwarded down the CRI. And so I was really mostly just wondering who would be the right person to be the approver for this. I assumed it would be Runal just because he approved the CRI changes, but yeah, I just wanted to check with who the right person is.
Yeah, I can take a look at it, Kevin.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'll add you then to the planning doc as the approver for this.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen the announcement, but I'll make a pass and let you know if I have any questions.
Okay, great. Thanks. And that's it.
Yeah, and that concludes the agenda for today. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up? Okay, if nothing else, have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.